המעלות, אשיין אל הגרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מהם אדוני, עוש השמים והארץ. אל ייתן למוט רגלך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן, שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני יצילך, עליית ימינך. יומם השמש לא יכך, וירח בלילה. אדוני שמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד העולם.
I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from the Eternal, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way, your protector will not slumber. Behold, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm and protect your being. Adonai shmor tzetecha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. May the Eternal guard your soul in your going and your coming, now and forevermore. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, Benot desha yarbitseni, almei menuchot yinachaleni. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures, you lead me beside still waters, you restore my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and staff you comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Eternal forever. Death has summoned our beloved Stephen Brian Koblentz. Our souls cry out unto you, O God. What are we? Are we the creatures of dust whose destiny is but to return to the dust from which we came? The ancient sage has taught us, the spirit of the human being is the lamp of the Eternal. Not even the darkness of death can extinguish the light which the Eternal has kindled in the sanctuary of the human soul. Therefore, O God, we thank you in this solemn hour for that which was deathless in the life of our cherished Stephen, and which is now revealed to us in all of its beauty. For his love that united us in life, and which death cannot sever. For his companionship which we shared along life's path, and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and mind, which brought us joy and happiness, and now have become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, we give you our praise. Grant unto us, O God, the strength of all the generations of our people, who in the face of bereavement proclaimed, Adonai Natan, v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God has given, God has taken away, still, blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us, yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, and that there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given. You gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and your love, as we now say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. The words of this week's Torah portion were recited millions of times by Stephen's father, Cantor Sanford Koblentz. He sang often, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Eternal is our God, the Eternal is one. Often referred to as the watchword of our faith, according to tradition, these words are recited in each of our daily prayers and when we lie down and when we rise up. In the Torah and in our prayers, these words are immediately followed by the familiar teaching, beginning with the words, V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. You shall love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. This passage is not only instructive of how we love God, but it serves as a paradigm for how we love one another. With all your heart. In ancient wisdom, the heart represented the seat of one's knowledge, a person's thoughts. With all your soul, the soul animates our emotions and our spiritual self. And with all your might, this refers to our strength, our actions. The philosopher Gershom Scholem summarized, we are commanded to love with our head, our heart, and our hand. A love like this is a complete love. It's the thinking about another, sharing a deep feeling with another, and doing for others. Stephen Koblentz understood what it meant to love like this. A wise, caring, and strong man, he used his head, his heart, and his hands to make sure that his family, his friends, and this community knew he loved them. As a husband and a father, he always thought about his family, placing their needs even above his own. He made every effort to emotionally be connected with his family, and his friends and even the stranger in his midst were the recipients of his caring as he opened his big heart to feel the joys and the pains of others. And Stephen took his thoughts and feelings and he put them into actions, doing for others all the time, whether in his personal life with his family or in his professional world as an attorney. A man of action, Stephen was there for you in every way he could be. Stephen Koblentz would come to understand the fragility of life better than most. The son of Cantor Sanford Koblentz, who served Congregation Beth Emeth and then Park Synagogue, Stephen was knowledgeable about the traditions, and he liked to sing the prayers with his father. He adored his mother, Shirley Folkman Koblentz, whose family owned one of the first travel agencies in the country. Close with his brother Joel, who was older than he by 2 years, they did everything together, even to getting their tonsils out together. After that procedure, Joel, you said that as a peace offering, your parents gave you packs of baseball cards, which frustrated you even more because you couldn't eat the gum. But the two of you loved baseball. Growing up in University Heights, the two of you were umpires for Little League, and as a freshman, Stephen even pitched for the Cleveland Heights High School team, giving the two of you some years of overlap on the field. The two of you would remain close all your years, using sports to connect in many multiple phone calls each day. A 2-minute call from Stephen inquiring about what time the game would be on or who was pitching kept things casual even when his health was crumbling. Wickedly smart, Stephen hardly had to open a book to gain true understanding of concepts, and he retained that knowledge long after the exam was over. Fond of saying homework was for others, instead, he enjoyed reading comic books and the back of the Cheerios cereal box as he would proceed to eat the whole thing at each sitting. He was athletic and smart and handsome, the things that set a person up for a kind of charmed youth. And that's about when Leslie met him. She's going to tell you their story in a few moments, but I'll just add that this 17-year-old girl fell for the golden boy. After completing his undergraduate studies in accounting at The Ohio State University, he stayed on another year to get his MBA and to wait for Leslie to finish school. He then began working as a CPA while he took night classes at Cleveland State's Marshall College of Law. On the moot court team and the winner of the Hugo Black Oral Advocacy Award, Stephen was using his mind and his heart to begin fighting for the underdog. After passing the notoriously difficult California bar, when he and Leslie returned to Cleveland, he had to go through it all again. And Stephen took the small cases that changed lives, as well as the giant cases that sustained companies. He was proud to be the corporate tax attorney for Stanford Oil for BP America, and he argued before the United States Supreme Court quite early in his career, saving the company billions on the Alaskan pipeline. A brilliant lawyer, he practiced with humility and humanity, and many of his clients became his closest lifelong friends. And many of his adversaries in court crossed that threshold too. Stephen believed that if a fellow lawyer put up a fair fight and operated with respect, that the good match made for collegiality and reaped friendships. Stephen decided to go into private practice in 1991 when he needed more freedom in his schedule to facilitate Leslie going back to medical school. To say he was supportive of your academic ventures is almost an understatement. Stephen always encouraged you to fulfill any and all of your dreams, and he was your biggest cheerleader throughout it all. Already in your 40s with 3 small children, Leslie, you just had to say the word, and Stephen was fine with it. You called him the fine boy. With his infectious sense of humor, he joked back, "I married every Jewish mother's dream, a lawyer and a doctor." And he could not have been prouder when you graduated top of your class and gave the speech at your graduation. You know that saying, behind every successful man, there's a great woman? Stephen proved it went both ways. A man of action, Stephen took charge of the home front. Cashiers at Heinen's knew him well, and he knew them. He knew their life stories, the stories of their children, their struggles. He wasn't just putting his groceries on the counter. He cared about the people with whom he interacted and often gave free legal advice as they chatted. He believed in people's rights and respected people of all backgrounds. If there was something amiss at the Orange schools or the kids needed a parent around, the teachers and the principals knew to call Stephen. He was there for your games, and he enjoyed seeing Adam master a fastball and play football as he had. But Adam, you didn't quite get your dad's height. to have the graceful jump shot that he had. You were the most like your father, and he was so proud to see you become a husband and a father too. Stephen was the one who kept you honest at synagogue as well. When Gadi Galili was tutoring Ross, and Ross got into his head that he didn't want to become a bar mitzvah or even be Jewish anymore, Stephen quickly put an end to those thoughts. As he did when you shortcutted his advice to have an old car checked out properly before driving it down to New Orleans, your dad had a way of letting you go on just so long to make sure that you knew that he was right. But he always made sure, too, that you had what you needed. When the brakes went out on your grandmother's car, he let you suffer a couple weeks, but then flew you home to buy you a proper vehicle. Of course, it was nothing as fabulous as the BMW that he liked to drive. As children, he piled you all into his car so you could run errands with him. He would coax you into being his ride-along buddy by bribing you with the stop at the toy store for Alexa to get a Barbie, while Adam and Ross often lobbied for a stop at Best Buy for some new technology. The three of you knew that your father's patience and occasionally temper, too, was there to teach you how to be a good person. And he also taught you a very important aspect of a work ethic. Alexa summed up his important lessons as be firm but fair, hungry but humble. He was your best friend. But the hardest lessons of life he would teach you all these last 15 years or so. He had had his health struggles all along, heart attack and cancer, other issues at younger ages. But as his legs started to give out, and he started walking with difficulty, and then when he became paralyzed and could no longer walk, he had some hard lessons to learn and to teach. What he learned was how much his entire family and his friends loved him. This love encompassed that paradigm of head, heart, and hand. Each one of you in your own way stepped up to make sure that Stephen knew you were thinking about him. You stayed emotionally connected to him and did so much to enable him to live as normally and as comfortably as possible at every stage of his declining health. Stephen had been a part of the Margolis family since his college years, and Michelle was like an older sister to him, and he like an older brother to Spanky. While you enjoyed lots of fun times in early years, you made sure that that spirit continued throughout his life. You were his companions and confidants, and amazing comfort and support to your sister as well. He was so appreciative also of Michael, who accompanied him to many of his doctor's appointments and served as his advocate for new treatments, and of Beth, who was always there by his side. He never complained, but as you said, Michael, in that time that should have been his years of reaping the benefits of a life well lived, having grown up in the travel industry, he should have been enjoying his time and travels with Leslie. But he did get to travel on a few cruises. A daredevil in his younger years, he was content to sit for hours with Barbara to watch the Alaskan totem poles grow or the salmon fish swim upstream, while Leslie and Steve went on the excursions that included helicopter and water flights around the glaciers. He loved hearing the stories. And closer to home, you'd scout out restaurants that easily accommodated his entry or push aside tables to make room. One of his favorite outings was to go to the Hard Rock Roxino, where with his motorized scooter he would disappear because he could exercise some independence and find his own way there. Several of his friends would oblige him with trips to the casino, making elaborate arrangements to get him down to the downtown one as well. It wasn't that he was a big gambler. He was already gambling on his health and not making much progress there. Rather, it was more that he just liked to be out and about, to people watch whenever he could. That became more complicated as his condition became more complex. When Steve and Leslie built their new home in Sterling Lakes, they anticipated a long and enjoyable life there, even as they made handicap accommodations in every room. But shortly after Adam and Dana announced that they were pregnant, the unforeseeable change to paralysis that would further confine Stephen occurred. While he rarely complained, as the realtor and friend Barbara insisted they should have an extra room on that first floor so that the women could watch what they wanted to and the men could do their own thing in the other room, Stephen realized very quickly that you weren't just spending his money for naught. That extra room off the kitchen became his way of staying connected to all the action in the house as family and friends continued to visit, even to those last days. He especially loved when little Owen came to visit, and he prominently displayed his picture on the wall to keep him company. Stephen's life journey taught his family that through the vicissitudes of life, love prevails. Leslie, as he was your rock, you became his, making sure that life did not pass him by. Your dedication and your commitment to his care and his continued involvement in everyone's life kept meaning in his life, even to his last days. About a week ago, you asked him to sing you a song, and he chose the words, "You're one in a million to me." We're not sure if that was a real song or he was making it up as he went along, but the words conveyed the depth of the relationship you shared over these 44 years. As Stephen told Adam in his last days, his main concern was that he'd stay around if you needed him. But knowing he had taught you all well what it means to love and be loved, he was able to go. He knew that Ross and Emma were on their journey to love. He knew that Alexa had learned the lessons of love too, and he could see the love that Adam and Dana had to give to Owen. His life felt content as he completed his mere 68 years of journey on this earth. The tradition teaches us that love does not die when a person's life is ended. As we read in Song of Songs, "Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death." As we part in this moment, we remember that you will continue to love Steve with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. We will continue to think of him in his best days, to stay connected to him as kindred spirits. And with his spirit, we'll be able to reflect on the deeds of loving kindness he would have wanted you to perform. May the love that you had for Steve and the love that he gave to you be a source of comfort to you now and always, as we join with the sages to declare, Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be your blessing. Amen. Leslie's going to share with you a magical story of their meeting. Ready?
Well, you may all think this is hard to do, but in reality it's not, because when I think of the 16 years, and actually many more years than that, of Steve struggling and fighting to live, this is like a piece of cake. It really is. I'm going to read this only because I don't want to just get off on a tangent. I want to tell you about a love story that very few people have. I had just graduated in 1970 from Orange High School, and I went with about 6 or 8 girls stuffed into a car to a dance. Those were the days before seatbelts. It was supposed to be a dance at Hillel, at Case Western Reserve, but for some reason at the last minute, the dance was canceled. So those of us who had gathered together decided we'd walk as a group to a street party on East 115th Hester Street. As we were walking towards the party, I saw this guy that I used to date who was going to Purdue University, and I was going to be starting at Indiana U in a month. And I thought it would be good to renew our acquaintance because I wanted to be dating when I was at school. At the same time, another guy came up to us, and he was trying to get into the conversation because he knew the Purdue student. He didn't say his name, and I didn't know anything about this guy. Turns out this young hotshot had been working nights at Republic Steel during the summertime, and he had a free night, so he decided he would go and check it out at Case Hillel and see what was doing. He mentioned then something about one of his dad's clients. And I said to him casually, I didn't know who he was, I said, "Oh, is your dad a lawyer?" Because while my dad was a scrap dealer, he was trained as a lawyer. So I figured, is your dad a lawyer? He said, "No," he said, "my dad has a travel agency." And then he added, "Some crazy lady called our house this morning. She was going to Europe, blah, 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 blah." And I turned to him and I said, "You know, I think that crazy lady was my mother." My parents were leaving on a trip to Europe that morning, and it wasn't until we exchanged names that I realized his family had known my family for years. And somehow, as children, we never got to really meet each other. The first night that I met Steve, he stayed at my house until 3 a.m. My dear sister, Michelle Margolis Kay, who is 2.5 years older, was left to supervise my brother Spanky, who was 6 years younger than me, and myself. At the time, it was about midnight or 1 in the morning, she decided, now you have to picture this, she had a huge orange juice can on her head because we all had to straighten our hair back then. She decided to do wash. I can tell you she wasn't very good at it from the beginning, but as soon as she started the washer, it started flooding. She forgot to pull out some pipe, and my new boyfriend of a few hours saved the day by pulling the plug and getting everything straightened around. Those of you who know Spanky know that they were kindred souls in that respect. I thought, wow, is this a good catch? Not only was he tall, he was about 6'3". The Margolises never knew anybody taller than 5'8", so to us that was really tall. And he was good looking. So I wrote my mother a letter when they were in Paris, and she said when she opened it up and received that letter, she knew in her heart that I was going to marry him. Our parents had been friends for over 25 years at the time. My dad had gone to law school with Stephen's uncle Marvin. Marvin's wife, Janet, had been my mother's best friend when my mom first moved to Cleveland and didn't know anybody. My mother and my mother-in-law, Shirley Folkman Koblentz, had been friends for years, and through life and our marriage, they actually became best friends. A month after we were dating, I left for college. Steve promised my mother he would get me packed up, ready to go. We had gone out the night before to our favorite restaurant, Angelo's Shenandoah in Chesterland. And they used to have waiters wearing tails and cloth tablecloths, and we just felt like we were rich and had made it. I then left for Indiana University as a freshman, and Steve went to University of Toledo as a sophomore. Before I left for college, actually the night that we first met, my father-in-law had grounded Steve the next day because he said to Steve, "Where were you so late?" He said, "Oh, I was at the Margolis house till 3 a.m. My father-in-law, who was very strict and respectful, said to Steve, "You can't stay at their house till 3 a.m. Her parents are in Europe." But I didn't care. I had fallen in love the moment I saw him. So picture this. Here we are, 1970. We're driving a big green Chrysler New Yorker, and my sister at 5'1" is the driver. She drives me to Steve's parents' house on Hillbrook. The grandparents were outside. The parents were outside. Did I say hello to anybody? No, I was in the back seat. We pull up, the door opens, and I said to him, "Get in," just like a hooker. And when I met Steve, and through the years, I always thought to myself, how could his parents even talk to me, let alone love me? Because that was so out of character for me. I was always taught to greet the parents and, everything else. But I was so in love, I didn't care. He got grounded. I was never grounded. My parents never grounded me, and I couldn't imagine a father saying you can't use the car. So I go off to college, and I didn't hear from Steve for a week. And I figured, well, I got a Dear John letter. What are you going to do? But alas, my birthday, October 1st, I get a gift in the mail. I open it up, and it's a beautiful necklace from a fraternity. But he didn't say in his card that we are lavaliered. He just said, "I hope you like this gift." So it took me 4 phone calls to him that night that I opened the gift. And you remember, some of you, how expensive long distance used to be years ago. And I finally had the nerve to ask him, "Are we lavaliered?" And he said, "Yes, you dummy, of course we're lavaliered." I remember the phone was hanging off the hook in the basement of the dorm, and I ran through the dorm yelling, "We're lavaliered, we're lavaliered." It was like yesterday. So we spent the whole first year of my time at college, and he was a sophomore, hopping on the Greyhound bus every other weekend. Our parents didn't know. I would go to Toledo. It was a 10-hour bus ride on the Greyhound, or he would come to Indiana. There were no freeways back then. There was no easy way to get there. They didn't have Uber. And at the end of the year, I had to transfer schools because my program in dietetics was being discontinued. We both decided we wanted to make the commitment to transfer to Ohio State. Needless to say, our relationship passed the test. We have been together 49 years as of July 25th, 2019, and we have been married 44 years as of June 1st, 2019. We were married June 1st at Park Synagogue by Rabbi Cohn. I had grown up at Park. My father-in-law was the cantor at Brit Emmeth. So after marriage, we went for a short time to Brit Emmeth, then we came back to Park. And I'm so forever grateful that I became part of the Koblentz family, because my parents died when I was young, and my in-laws knew me longer than my own parents. My husband and I raised 3 beautiful children, Adam, Ross, and Alexa Rose, and a beautiful, we called her a daughter, not a daughter-in-law, Dana, and a soon-to-be another daughter that we're gaining, Emma, who is engaged to our son, and a beautiful young grandson, Owen, who is 3.5. And he would call Steve a lot, "Grandpa, Nana," and when Steve would hear those words, that's what kept him going. I want to thank my brother-in-law, Joel, for always being there for Steve. I'd say, Steve, who's on the phone? Joel, because they don't talk a lot. They kind of like, Corey Kluber, or this one or that one. I don't even know how the conversation would go because it was never words. It was 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and I knew what they were talking about. I want to thank my sister, Michelle Kay. For those of you that know, we're like glued together. We found out we're even wearing the same shoes today that we bought separately. She's been there for me for everything in life. And her significant other, Michael Glazer. I can't begin to tell you. He and Steve always considered him to be a brother to Steve from another mother. That's just how they were. And my brother Spanky and my sister-in-law Beth. I have to tell you a quick story. When Spanky was 11 and I had met Steve, I was 17. We had to drop Spanky off at Cleveland Hebrew schools. We lived in Pepper Pike. It was very desolate, not a lot of transportation. And I still remember to this day, we are on Fairmont Boulevard heading west, and the light was still red. So Steve said, Spanky, get out and cross the street and go over to the Cleveland Hebrew schools. And he told Steve he didn't know how to cross the street. So my dearest husband even taught him to cross the street. I also want to thank Maddie and Tootsie, our little dogs that gave Steve so much pleasure in life. And to his many girlfriends. I bet you most of you don't know, but Steve had a private little cadre of girlfriends. You probably don't know. I'm only going to name a few of you, but you all know who you are. There's Sheila, there's Barbara, there's Sue, there's Kathleen, there's many, many others of you, and I never got jealous, even though you didn't want to talk to me. They called to talk to Steve. They didn't need me. They needed Steve for advice, for just a hello. Even on our street in Sterling Lakes when we first moved in and the ladies all realized that I worked and I wasn't home every day, they said to Steve, oh, you're home. Would you like to join us for our weekly lunches or our monthly lunches? And he said, sure, but I draw the line, no maj. And then a final thank you to Katrina, Steve's aide for over a year and a half. I used to tell them that they were like two old Marys. She knew what had to be done. When she met him, he told her he doesn't like to be told what to do. He's a lawyer. He likes to tell people what to do. And she said, I'm sorry, but this is my job, and I may have to at times tell you what to do. And she's really what kept him alive for the past year and a half. The last thing I just want to tell you is something that's always stayed with me. When my father died years ago, Sam Miller had been a classmate of his. And he wrote us a note, and it is so very true. He said to us to always remember that death is only painful to the living. And you know what? When Steve passed away, I finally was at peace in my heart and so grateful that he didn't have to face the challenges. I never met anybody that had the extent of illness that Steve had. More than 16 years. He had back trouble when we first got married, and he was in traction. And this was a man that fought every day of his life to live and to have a smile and to never complain. So please keep these things in your heart. That's what Steve would want you to know about him. Thank you.
I want to share with you a few words now that were written by Michael Simmons, who was a business friend of Steve's. It's written to Adam, Ross, and Alexa. I can't tell you how sorry I am that your father passed away. I spent the evening thinking over our years together, all the things we talked about, the lessons he taught me, and the profound loss. So I can't imagine how you feel. I was introduced to your father by my former family attorney, Manny Hecht, a very prominent Cleveland lawyer who was a stickler for ethics and competency, having been the most accomplished graduate of Michigan State School of Law. Manny chose Steve for us because he said he was one of the brightest and the most caring people he'd ever met, and that was reference enough for me. Soon after meeting your father and I became fast friends, and we often met in his office, drove around the city in his BMW. He never let me drive him in my Mercedes, or had lunch in one of the many diners that he frequented. The interesting thing about our lunches was that when the waitress would come over, he'd stop our business conversation cold to talk calmly and caringly to them, and they would be genuinely happy to see him. After lunch, he'd tell me their story, how many children they had, what grade and school they were in, and how difficult the woman's life was struggling to hold it all together for her family. After hearing a few of these stories, I came to understand why Steve was such a heavy tipper and why he went to the diners. Steve always took the time to notice and value people, not status, money, or position, and it's what made him so special. We'd go back to his office and to the pile of IRS notices overwhelming his desk. Many times he'd get a call from a client during our visit, and afterwards he'd say something like, "Not sure what makes me think if they don't pay the IRS, they're ever going to pay me." And I'd ask him why he was doing it for just that reason. Steve would then give me examples of a woman whose husband had signed a false joint tax return, unbeknownst to her, and had gotten her into trouble. The wife found out after the house of cards collapsed and had gotten divorced, but the IRS still insisted that she was 50% responsible for the debt. Your father did all he could to correct such injustices, even when he knew the odds were against that person ever being able to pay him anything close to the time he had in that case. Your dad was Don Quixote, champion of the little person. It's what drove him in his work, and he wore that mantle proudly. But Steve's all-consuming passion was you three, and how proud he was of each of you. His office was full of your pictures. He stopped every meeting to immediately answer your phone calls, and he talked of nothing else during our lunches. Where you were in school, what your current goals were, who you were dating, wedding plans. It was obvious you were the center of his world. In the 2 decades I have known your father, I can't think of a time when he didn't think of you first and how he could help you, often by not helping you, but allowing you the time to figure it out for yourselves. The past few years, your dad grew tired, his body was failing him, and lesser men would have just given up and let nature take its course. But Steve wanted to be there for you, and the struggle was worth it to him, painful and lonely as it sometimes was. One day I realized how tired he was when Steve took me out for lunch on what was the last time he drove me in his BMW. I didn't know it was the last time he'd drive me, but he knew it. After lunch at Joe's on Green and Mayfield, he drove me to his old neighborhood, every house he lived in and school he attended, playgrounds he played ball at, and even the house of boyhood friends as he reminisced about his youth. He was nostalgic and melancholic as we drove. I went home that day with mixed emotions and told my wife that I felt Steve was saying goodbye to me. Our drive was Steve wanting me to see who he was, where he came from, and to understand why he had made the life choices he had. I felt honored that he opened up to me, and that he felt it important that I really know him. Steve and I never talked about it afterwards, but from that point on, I began to realize how much his health was deteriorating, and that he was really struggling to just get through it all. He never complained, ever, always keeping the conversations positive, focusing on our families and our futures. I and so many others have been blessed to have known your father, and I feel the loss at this moment. But the lessons Steve taught me, the gentle and caring way he worked to help other people, has made an impact on my soul, and I am a better man for having him as my friend. I will miss our talks, but know he isn't gone. He's closer. Without the physical barriers, Steve's right next to me, offering suggestions on how to approach something or talk to someone. I want to thank each of you for welcoming me into your family and for sharing your father with me. I have tried to be a good friend to Steve as he was to me, and hope that I was able to communicate to him how important a contribution to the world he was. I love you all as I have been a part of your journeys, and pray that time will heal the pain of your father's passing, and that his legacy will continue to live on in each of you. God bless. Mike Simmons. Each of you has precious memories of Steve. We take a moment now as we silently compose the eulogy of our own hearts. Yehi l'ratzon imrei fi, v'hegyon libi lefanecha, Adonai tzuri v'goali. May not only the words that I speak, but even my most precious meditations and private memories be acceptable to you, my God, my rock, and my Redeemer. Amen. We ask God to accept Stephen's soul with the words of El Malay. Please rise. Shalom Baruch v'Shmuel v'Shema.
El Malay Rachamim Shochayna Bamramim Hametzemeno Hanechono Tachat Kanefei Ashchina B'mahalot Kedoshim Adhorim Kazohar Garaki Yamazhirim Et Nishmot Shalom Baruch Ben Shmuel V'Shena Shegalach Leholamo Began Eden Techai Menuchato Anabal Varachamim Astirai Beseter Knafecha Leholamim ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני ונחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר